I lived for 2 weeks in the bottom of the sea, and you think about all the things that could be down there. And I saw right in front of me this huge eyeball, about the size of a saucer, staring, unblinking right at me. And I freaked out.
A fisherman barely escaping death after being dragged underwater by an octopus, a Navy officer's encounter with a prehistoric sea creature, strange lights spotted by a fisherman hovering off the coast of North Carolina. These are terrifying discoveries deep sea fishermen wish they never found. This footage here comes from C.R. Larkin on YouTube, who'd been fishing at Cape Lookout in North Carolina on November 13th, 2018, around 9 p.m. when he spotted these mysterious orange lights in the sky over the water. It's a solid piece of footage because the camera's almost totally stationary, so no nauseating shaky cam, and we get a nice long look at whatever these things are. Now, this is clearly not a satellite or a plane because the lights aren't gliding through the sky, they're just hovering there. And here's where it gets really strange. Initially it's just two lights, but then two more appear above. All four of them glimmer in the darkness for a bit, and then the ones on the bottom fade away. So just what the hell is going on here? In July of 1965, Captain Marvin McCamis and Captain Bill Rainey, both experienced Navy officers, were aboard the deep-sea submersible Alvin, conducting a routine check on the Artemis listening array in the Bahamas. They were diving in the infamous tongue of the ocean, a deep part of the ocean floor, over 1,500 meters or about 5,000 feet down. As they descended another 300 feet to follow a cable spanning a massive crevice, something strange caught their eye. McCamis thought the submersible was drifting along the cable, but then he noticed something odd, stating it wasn't the sub drifting, it was the object that was moving. What he saw next would leave him completely stunned. The object, which first appeared to be a utility pole, was actually alive. Going on to say, I was astonished to see a thick body with flippers, a long neck, and a snake-like head with two eyes looking right at us. It looked like a big lizard with flippers that had two sets of them, end quote. So what McCamis was looking at sounds a lot like a plesiosaur, an extinct marine reptile which people in various parts of the world have claimed to spot on rare occasions, most famously the Loch Ness Monster, for example. The creature swam away quickly and McCamis couldn't catch it on camera. His equipment was set to photograph objects within 15 to 25 feet, but the creature had already swum out of range. When McCamis surfaced and reported the encounter, people weren't really buying it. Obviously, he was just laughed off the deck by his fellow officers. McCamis later wrote in the wet log, but he believed it was deleted by the Navy and it never made it into the final records. But after hundreds of dives, McCamis insisted that he had never seen anything like it again. Alright, this is a crazy story. So in 1952, a fisherman named Gordon Hastie had a terrifying encounter off the coast of Pepin Island, New Zealand. It all started when his fishing line got stuck, so he jumped into the waist-deep water to free it. As he followed the line though, something suddenly grabbed hold of his ankle. Before he knew it, he was being dragged underwater. Then he was pulled into a deep hole, and to make things even worse, he could barely see because a thick black cloud of ink was obscuring his vision. He was under attack from an octopus, which wrapped its tentacles around him. Hastie fought back, desperate to free himself, but the thing had too strong a hold of him. But then Hastie remembered his blade. Through the chaos, he managed to pull it out and began slashing at the tentacles, and finally the octopus released its grip and Hastie swam to the surface, but he hadn't gotten out unscathed. He'd lost a small portion of his finger in the fight thanks to the octopus's sharp beak. Ever seen a shark eaten in one bite? Well, you're about to. Take a look at this. That was awesome, but terrifying all the same. This footage was captured by fishermen off the coast of Bonita Springs, Florida in August of 2014. They'd been reeling in a black-tipped shark when a Goliath grouper sprung out of the water and just snagged it. It's so freaky watching this shadowy form growing in the water. It's like you know something big is coming if it's bold enough to sneak up on a shark like that. And my god, does it look monstrous. The spines along its back, it almost looks like a living dinosaur. From Reddit user Thunderbird comes a story his friend told him about when he worked in the Navy. Not me, but a friend of mine worked on a submarine while in the Navy back in the 70s. His sub was participating in NATO naval war games exercises in the North Atlantic. Back then, most exercises were practicing warfare using scenarios involving Warsaw Pact foes. So naturally, the Soviets were monitoring this, including Soviet submarines that had snuck into the area. His crew saw a British sub return from sea with the front end broken off and the forward bulkhead exposed to the sea. One sailor from the sub told him that they had an underwater collision at speed with another submerged vessel. The problem is the bulkhead can seal out water under pressure, but it's not intended to withstand the force of the water as the sub moves through the water. The crew used wood timbers to brace the bulkhead and prevent collapse as they got underway. There were no corresponding reports from any other participants in the area. They were in deep water and there were no known obstacles. Their best guess is they hit a submerged Soviet sub sent to spy on them. Everyone was sworn to secrecy and nothing made it to the papers. There's said to be a terrifying creature lurking off the coast of Mexico's Baja California peninsula, and it's known as the black demon shark. It was first spotted in 2008, and ever since there have been a number of reports from local fishermen who claim to have seen this enormous shark lurking in the deep. But what sets this shark apart? Why does it have such an ominous nickname? Well, first of all, it's big. The black demon is said to range anywhere from 20 to 60 feet long, estimated to weigh in at 50 to 100,000 pounds. It's often described looking like a great white shark, except it's much darker, almost black, and it's said to have an unusually large tail. Locals aren't sure what to make of it. Some think it could be a surviving megalodon. Others believe it might just be an unusually large great white, or perhaps there's actually more than one, an undiscovered species of shark. There have been expeditions to find the mysterious beast. It was even featured on an episode of Monster Quest, but no solid proof has ever been found. In 1608, explorer Henry Hudson was navigating the cold northern waters off Norway when he wrote about a very strange encounter he and his crew came across: a group of mermaids. They were as big as the men, he wrote, with very white skin and long dark hair. As Hudson described it, the mermaids' tails resembled those of dolphins, but with the distinctive spots of a mackerel. He seemed genuinely excited about the sighting, detailing the encounter in vivid detail. Now, of course, sailors in those days did like spinning tales, and some of them were clearly embellished. Some people looking back figured that Hudson may have just mistaken some other sea creatures like manatees for the mermaid creatures, but Hudson's sighting is especially strange because he was sailing in the Bering Sea near Norway, where there are no manatees. So could he have been seeing something else entirely? Naturalist Philip Henry Goss, writing in the 1800s, argued that Hudson wasn't just mistaking an animal for a mermaid. Goss believed Hudson, being an experienced sailor, would have been able to recognize any local marine life. Instead, he figured that Hudson might have just fabricated the whole story, or maybe, just maybe, he and his crew actually encountered something unknown at that time, or even now. Lamprey eels. Whoever encountered one of these things back in the day must have been terrified. These things are pretty nightmarish. They're ancient, prehistoric levels of old. They've been swimming Earth's waters for over 360 million years, surviving all sorts of changes to the planet. They have a circular toothed mouth that they use to attach to other fish and feed on their BLOOD and other bodily fluids. They're basically like underwater vampires. Really freaky creatures. They also remind me of massive-sized slugs, but with razor-sharp teeth. Not fun. Some lamprey species are parasitic, others are non-parasitic, mostly consuming small invertebrates. They use their sharp disc-like mouths to anchor onto their victims, and once attached they drill into the fish, kinda, and then just start slurping away. These things start as tiny, blind larvae in rivers, then grow into larger predators that live in the ocean, before finally returning to freshwater to lay eggs before dying. So they have a pretty bizarre life cycle as well. Now, this doesn't look real, does it? I mean, this has to be photoshopped, right? Well, it's not. Just a couple months ago, 2 young fishermen in Australia made a catch so rare it left locals completely stunned. They hauled in a giant oarfish, a creature that's incredibly hard to spot in the wild. Professor Cullum Brown from Macquarie University stated that there are only 3 species, with the giant oarfish growing to 8 meters in length. These sea monsters are rarely seen, mainly because they live in deep waters, usually 250 meters or about 820 feet below the surface. And finally, let's talk about a really weird creature called the hagfish. Yeah, just look at this thing. Looks like something that could totally be from another planet. A planet I'd rather not visit, thank you very much. First off, they look really strange, but they're also living slime factories. When threatened, hagfish produce this goo from specialized glands. And I'm not just talking about a little bit, I mean, it really is a surprising amount. The slime is like a defensive power for them. It clogs the gills of predators, giving the hagfish a chance to make a quick escape. And honestly, it really is like that scene from South Park where like Randy's dad's like, "It's a ghost, it slimed me," which I can't really go into detail on for obvious reasons, but just looking at this footage, yeah, it looks very similar. Now, when it comes to eating, things get really gruesome. They're scavengers with a taste for the expired. A dead fish lying on the ocean floor, along comes the hagfish. They burrow into the carcass, tying themselves into a knot to get better leverage, and then they devour their meal from the inside out. Hagfish don't have true jaws. Instead, they have a raspy tongue-like structure that they use to scrape off bits of their prey, almost like they have a built-in cheese grater for a mouth. It's pretty nuts. With all that said, I've been your host, James, and I'll catch you, yes, you specifically, in the next video.